Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy little human beings, you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the first Hallowstein video of 2021. Happy Hallowstein, guys. I'm so happy we could meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all this craziness, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today for our very first Hallowstein video of the year, of the month, we're going to be covering the wild murder of 15-year-old Martha Moxley. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want. They're both Bratterstein, but no pressure. So before we get started, guess what? Today's video is sponsored by Dossier. If you're not familiar with Dossier, I'm going to remind you all about Dossier. Dossier is a fragrance company that creates luxury scents at a fraction of luxury prices. Whereas a luxury bottle of perfume can literally cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars. How dare they? Dossier's perfumes range from $29 to $49, and they offer you bulk deals where if you buy 3 or more, you get like 25% off and free shipping. It's just a really good deal, especially if you're trying to save some money in this very rocky and uncertain economy and world that we are currently all trying to just get by in. So today, they actually sent me a mystery box, okay? And I haven't even gotten into this box yet. It's still sealed up, so we're gonna bust into it right now, and we're gonna see what's inside. It's like Christmas, but Halloween. Okay, let's look at it. Okay, so inside my box, my mystery box, we got another 2 little baby boxes that we're gonna go into and see what I got over here. So today in my mystery box, they sent me Floriental Vanilla, which is inspired by YSL's Black Opium. I actually have this one already, and it just smells so good. And I've never tried YSL Black Opium, but another friend of mine, a girl here on YouTube named Monique, she told me that she's bought this one independent. She hasn't worked with Dossier. She bought this one and she's like, it smells exactly the same and it smells so freaking good. And if I remember correctly, YSL is not cruelty-free and Dossier is, and that's very important to me. So if that's important to you. The other one they sent me is Aromatic Star Anise. Ooh, wait a minute. And this one is inspired by Dior's Sauvage A D Toilette. I don't know about that name, but ooh, that smells good. Wait a minute. I don't know if I've ever had a perfume that smells quite like this, but I'm really excited to now have a perfume that smells just like this. So I just went on their website and both of these scents retail for $29. And I know for certain that YSL and Dior cost a lot more than $29. And in addition to that, Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off for a limited time when you use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout and click the link down below, which I will remember to put in my description box, even though sometimes I forget. And then my sister texts me and she's like, bro, you didn't put it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. It will be down there. And that'll give you 10% off of your new favorite perfume. I just want to quickly say thank you to Dossier for wanting to work with me again. We're growing into like a nice little relationship here. Things seem to be going really well. And of course I want to thank you guys for always being super supportive of everything I do on my channel because you guys are so tight and I love you so much platonically. Okay, so now that I'm done spreading the good word of Dossier, we can get into this case. Now this is a case that I had never actually heard of before, which is wild because when I started reading about it, so what happened was I went on Google, the Google machine, and I was like, hey, Google, can you please tell me about some true crime cases that happened on or about Halloween? This one popped up on a list. I started reading into it and I was like, whoa. And then I was like, whoa. And then I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? For a synopsis, what happened was on October 30th, 1975, Martha Moxley, who was only 15 years old, left her house to go out and participate in like an annual trickster night. It was called Mischief Night or Hackers Night. And basically what it was where all the neighborhood teenage kids would go out and create a little mischief around the neighborhood. You know, TPing, ding dong ditch. They're gonna egg your house. They're just gonna cause a little hell and just be teenagers, right? Well, she went out and never came home. The next day, on Halloween, October 31st, she was found in her own yard, murdered. Her pants and underwear were pulled down below her hips. There was a broken golf club nearby her. It was super fucked up. With that said, today I'm going to tell you that whole terrible story, and while I do, I'm going to be putting on a little bit of beauty makeup with like a spooky twist. Now, if you've been here before and you're kind of like, wait a minute, where's the like Halloween looks, like face painting and stuff? I did upload a video on Friday explaining everything and why it's a little bit different this year, so I will try to remember to link that. If not, you might want to check that out. There's a lot of announcements in that video that'll explain what is going on, but that's what's going on this year. Sometimes I might do face painting, probably not. It's mostly going to be beauty makeup with maybe a spooky twist. Maybe it'll be darker, a little more intense than usual. I'm not really sure. It depends on if the muses take me. Now, if you've never been here before and you're kind of like, true crime and makeup, that's not really my thing. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you find a channel that you enjoy more, but if you're kind of on the fence, like, I don't know how I feel about that, maybe stick around. You might be surprised by how much you like it. Now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 15-year-old Martha Moxley. Martha Moxley was born August 16th, 1960, making her a Leo, and she was one of 2 children, the only daughter, born to parents Dorothy and David. At the time of her death, Martha was attending Greenwich High School and was greatly seen as being in the prime of her life. She was a bubbly girl, a popular girl, a pretty girl, a confident girl. On one of her report cards growing up, a teacher said that whenever Martha walked into the classroom, it was like sun was coming up in the morning. And during her freshman year in high school, she was actually voted the girl with the best personality. Martha was really good in school and relatively well behaved. She didn't get into a lot of serious trouble or anything like that, but she did take part in normal sort of things that teenagers do, and of these things included staying out past curfew from time to time. And this is actually what happened to Martha the weekend before Halloween, and she ended up actually getting grounded for this. The night of October 30th, 1975, though Martha was grounded, she begged and pleaded with her mother to, make an exception to the grounding and let her go out for the neighborhood's annual Hackers Night or Mischief Night. And though her mother, wanted to stick to her guns, sometimes, you don't want your kids to miss out on the things that, their rites of passage, things that they really want to do. So after incessantly begging for hours for her mother to let her go, she did decide that she could go, but she had to be back at home by 10 p.m. That was her curfew. That's when she had to be home. So at about 7 p.m., she left her house. She'd put on a parka because it was going to be freezing that night. Apparently it was unseasonably cold that evening. She grabbed a can of shaving cream, some soap, some eggs, and she headed out the door to meet 2 of her friends. The 3 then headed off into the night in the direction of the home of a couple of neighborhood boys, a couple of teenage boys, a couple of very rich, very well-off brothers. This was Thomas Skakel, who was 17 years old and went by the nickname of Tommy, and Michael Skakel, who was 15 years old and went by Michael. The 2 boys' father was actually out of town on this evening, and so he had hired a tutor to come over and spend time with the boys and to be tutoring them in some sort of math, kind of babysitting them. But somehow the boys had convinced this man that instead he should go upstairs and stay out of sight so that they could have a party. And this guy was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So he was upstairs watching TV while below him a full-blown rager was happening with a bunch of teenagers drinking, smoking, having a good time, music, dancing, maybe some drugs. We're not sure. But they were having just a good old time. And this is where Martha and her friends were headed and going and showed up. This is where they were going to be partying. During the party, Martha was just having a good time. She was hanging out with her friends. She was socializing. She was hanging out with the Skakel brothers. She ended up at one point in a car with some friends and with Michael Skakel. And it seemed like Michael was really into Martha and was spending his evening trying to win her favor. And she was a little bit flirty, but she wasn't completely sold on him. And that's probably because she had eyes for his older and cooler and maybe cuter. I guess that's up to opinion. But his brother Tommy had her attention. At one point, while she's sitting in the car with Michael and a couple of friends, Tommy actually comes over to the car and he's like, scoot on over, everybody let me in. So he squeezes in right next to Martha, and she finds herself in the back seat of the car between Michael and Tommy Skakel. Just, can you imagine how awkward that would be? Since this one, Michael's trying to pursue you, this one, Tommy is who you would like to be pursuing you, and you're just sandwiched in between these two rival rich brothers. So while in the car, both brothers are like trying to win Martha over. They're both flirting with her. Michael had already been hanging out with her most of the night, had been putting the work in and really like laying down the groundwork, trying to get in her favor. But then Tommy showed up and he was just really flirty with her, and he was like touching on her, like rubbing on her thighs, and she would be like, and like push his hand away. It was that kind of thing, but between both of these guys. So this was very awkward. As I'm sure you can imagine, as I'm sure I can imagine. And at one point in the night, two of the older Skakel brothers, because there were several of them, I think there were, like 7. It was like a big family. Two of the brothers came out and were like, hey, Pipsqueaks, get bent, I need this car. We're gonna go over to the cousin's house, we're gonna watch a movie. Unless you wanna come, get out. And Michael was like, okay, I'm gonna shoot my shot one last time. Hey, Martha, would you like to come with me to watch this movie? That'll be a really good time. And she's like, no, actually, no, I don't. What I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna get out of this car right now and I'm gonna go off with Tommy. So Michael stays in the car to go off with his brothers. Tommy gets out and him and Martha like get out together, and they're like laughing and touching each other and kind of pushing each other. And that's the last time that she was seen by somebody, and that was at about 9:30. So now we fast forward to 10 p.m. and Martha's mother is up waiting for her kids to come home. I think her brother was already home at this point. Her brother had been out that night too, but doing his own thing. So at around 10 p.m. she hears some noises outside, some clanging, some people talking, some dogs barking. She's like, oh, my kid's actually home on time. Hallelujah, that's great. But then the noises sort of stop and Martha never comes in the home. So she's like, okay, maybe not. Why did I let her go out? I'm sure she didn't say this, but I'm sure this is going through her head. Like, I shouldn't have let her go out. I knew she wasn't going to be home on time, etc, etc. So eventually Martha's mother ends up actually falling asleep while waiting for her kids. And a couple hours later, she wakes up and she goes and she checks Martha's room and she sees that Martha still isn't home. And this is when she starts to panic. So worried, her mother starts calling around, and this is when she finds out that Martha, instead of being out doing mischief shit, had actually been at the Skakel boys' house. So she calls over to the Skakel boys' house. She finds out she was last with Tommy, asks Tommy like, hey, where is she? When did you last see her? And this is when Tommy tells her that he hadn't seen Martha since 9:30 when she actually left heading home on foot. And her mother hears this and freaks out because at this point it's many hours later and Martha still hasn't gotten home. So this obviously doesn't bode well for her. So this is when her mother calls the police and reports her daughter missing. Police come by and they do like a quick nighttime search, you know, just with some flashlights trying to look around in neighbors' yards, and don't find her. So they leave. They're like, she'll probably be home soon, don't worry. And they leave this mother to just have like the most restless night that I imagine she's ever had in her entire life. So the next day when Martha still isn't home, people start gathering at Martha's home to, you know, console her mother, be there for her. Because at the time, Martha's father was actually away on business. So this woman's literally dealing with this completely alone. So people start showing up at the house to try to console her mother and kind of be there when new information comes in. Just be first on the scene. And this is a mixture of both her friends, Dorothy's friends, that's her mother's name, and Martha's friends, and they're all hanging out. And some of Martha's friends had even gotten together and started going out and searching for her, seeing if she was sleeping in someone's yard in like a sleeping bag, just trying to find any excuse for why this could be happening, any reasonable explanation for what was going on here. So it was at about 12 p.m. on Halloween, October 31st, that a friend of Martha's, another 15-year-old girl named Sheila, was headed over to Martha's home to be part of the search party, to be part of the collective group of people who were there supporting her mother and trying to find Martha. And while she's walking, she decides she's going to cut across Martha's own yard. To get into the property faster. And when she does this, this is when she notices something weird from a distance. It's a figure laying beneath a large tree covered in pine needles. And at first she thought that it was a sleeping bag. But as she got closer, she realized it wasn't, that this was actually Martha. That Martha was laying face down and was clearly not alive. So Sheila runs into the house to tell the adults in there what she had seen. She tells them hysterically that she thinks that she found Martha, and her mother was like, well, is she okay? And the girl just crying was like, no, she's not. So after this, it was decided that Dorothy probably shouldn't be the one to go outside and confirm what was being seen, because it would just be too much on her. So one of her friends goes out to confirm what Sheila was saying. So her friend goes out, sees what she had seen, and comes back in and confirms that it was, in fact, Martha below that tree, and her mother just sunk into herself, dude. I can't even imagine how that would feel to get that news. And as I said, her husband was away, so she's learning this all on her own, that her daughter is dead. And she wasn't even supposed to be out that night. She had been grounded. I can't imagine, like, just the trauma of that moment for her. It just seems unimaginable. Police arrive in this area quick as hell, dude. By 12:30, they were already at the house, at the property, processing the crime scene. The problem is that the officers, the first responders, did not have any experience investigating homicides, because there hadn't been a homicide in this area in like 40 years. And this wasn't just like a regular murder. This was a gnarly murder. Martha was in horrible condition. She was outside. She had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. Her head appeared to have been beaten in several times, like they described it as caved in. They said they couldn't even tell what color her hair was because everything above her shoulders was just red. She had been stabbed through her neck with a piece of golf club, and her underwear and her pants had been pulled down. So this was just like a very intense scene for anyone, especially people who don't know what they're doing. In investigating further, police found that there was a trail of blood and tissue that led to the front of the house and through the gravel driveway of the home. And it was on this trail that they found the pieces of a broken I don't know golf very well. A rare brand of 6-iron golf club. They found all the pieces except for the handle. From the evidence, it appeared that the killer had approached Martha from behind and had hit her one time extremely hard in the head with the golf club. She had no defensive wounds, so it was either that she was taken by complete surprise or that she knew her attacker. The person then drug her across the yard, I believe by her feet, to an area a little bit farther away, not the tree where she was finally found, but a little farther away, where they then beat her with such aggression that they shattered a golf club. There was a ton of blood in this area, which suggests that she was laying there for up to an hour bleeding before she was finally killed with that final stab to her neck. So somebody just hung out there while she bled on the ground. And after stabbing her in the neck, they drug her to hide her body beneath the trees and hid her under the pine needles, where she was finally found the next morning. So that right there is a lot of information for any police department to handle, especially one that just doesn't know what they're doing, and a lot of mistakes were made. First, after discovering Martha's body, the two officers that were first on the scene didn't secure the crime scene. Nobody stayed with her body to ensure that nobody else walked through it, that it wasn't compromised. One cop went back to his car to call it in, and called it in over the radio instead of over a phone. So the media heard it, and then the media was swarming all over the place. And while he was doing that, the other cop didn't stay with Martha. He instead got distracted by a dog and went over and started petting the dog while the dog was sitting there licking up blood off the grass. Which one, I get being distracted by a dog, but also what and ew. They also moved Martha's body several times when they weren't supposed to, and there were just people everywhere walking all around the crime scene, not taking any precautions, different officers. There was also, because the cop had called in over the radio, the media was there, the neighbors were there, the place was just a disaster, dude. And another thing that's really intense that I saw in a documentary, in this documentary, the person who said this was one of the officers who was first on the scene, but at the time of the documentary, he no longer worked for the police department. He was retired. So take this how you will, but this is what he said. This wasn't in the police reports, though. Okay. So he said, that when they first arrived on the scene, before they left Martha's body alone to go play with the dog and call in the murder, that the missing handle of the golf club, the handle that's been missing, never recovered, was not found at the scene, according to police reports. Well, this officer says that the handle was there, and that it was actually still stuck in Martha's neck, but that when they went away and came back, it was then gone. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I believe that that's true, but I saw it in a documentary, so I thought I would mention it here. But either way, that crime scene was a big-ass mess. The news of this murder just spread like wildfire in this area because the place where this happened, I don't think I even mentioned it yet, but the area that this happened in was super bougie. This was just like not a thing that happened here. It was a private gated community, and at the time this area housed the richest people in America. So it was like a very, very fancy bougie place. Things didn't happen here. There weren't outsiders here. And Martha and her family had only moved here in like 1974, so they had been living there only about a year when Martha was killed. It was just intense. Martha's funeral took place on November 4th, 1975, so just a couple days after her murder, and there were hundreds of people packed into the Lutheran church where the service took place to, you know, pay respects to Martha even if they had never met her, to give condolences to her parents. And of the people who attended Martha's funeral was Tommy Skakel. So speaking of Tommy Skakel, when police started investigating, you know, Martha's murder, trying to put together her last night, retrace her steps, police found that Martha had been at this party and had been cozying up to, you know, a teenage boy who's a little bit older than her, and this was a boy named Tommy Skakel, as you guys all know, but police are just learning this. The two had even been seen cuddling up, cozying up, and kissing together next to a fence not far from Martha's own home. So police were like, very interested in him. So naturally, police want to speak to Tommy. I mean, he's the last person to be seen with her. He's the one she had been cozying up with, being a romantic partner that night. Oh, and I didn't even mention this. And that golf club that they found near her body, the one that had been used to kill her, had been traced back to the Skakel home. When police had initially searched the home, they looked in the garage and they found a set of rare golf clubs that matched the one at the scene, and the only one that was missing was the 6-iron. And when they looked at these golf clubs, they found that the name of the boy's deceased mother, because she had died when they were young, was engraved on the handle. So if they... My whole head's going crazy. So that could be a good reason why this handle, the part that had their mother's name, was never recovered at the scene or never put into the police report. So, police are naturally thinking they've got their guy. What's weird is that even though it seemed pretty clear police had their guy because of he was the last one to be seen with her, he was romantic with her, the golf club was from his house, police never got an official search warrant for the Skakel home. The only time that they ever went and searched is because the father gave permission, but it was like guarded, not guarded, what am I trying to say, a supervised search, so he could just stop them whenever he wanted because they never got a real search warrant, which I think is odd. And it was during this search that those golf clubs were found and police noted them, but they never actually took them into evidence. Why that is, we're going to get into a little bit later when we get into like who the Skakels were, but even though they never took them into evidence, the golf clubs, and they never got a search warrant, they did bring Tommy in for questioning. They actually brought both boys in for questioning, Michael and Tommy, but the questionings were definitely more casual. They weren't pushing real hard on these boys. It wasn't like interrogations. It was just like hanging out, having a chat. Michael tells police that he last saw Martha at about 9:30 when he, left the party that night to go watch that movie with his brothers. He says that he got home at 11:30 and he just went straight to bed. His alibi was pretty open and shut. Tommy told police that he last saw Martha at about 9:30 as well when she left to walk home by herself. He says that he then went in the house and went upstairs to work with that tutor who was there with him, to work on a school project that was due. But when police looked into this story, they found that there was no such school project due. And even when they brought this to Tommy's attention, like, hey bro, you were working for a project that doesn't exist, he stuck to his story. And he even took a polygraph test. He actually took 2 polygraph tests. One came back inconclusive and one came back that he was actually telling the truth. Another interesting note about these brothers is that after Martha was killed, her mother actually went through her diary to just kind of like see what information she could find. And she found that in Martha's diary, Martha had talked about the Skakel brothers and talked about how she didn't trust one of them, but she never specified in her diary which one it was. So this was not especially helpful, but I thought it was worth mentioning because I thought it was interesting. So with no additional evidence, no eyewitnesses, no other suspects, the case went cold, and it stayed cold for years. Police were just really resistant to move forward with prosecuting either of these brothers without more evidence or eyewitness testimony, which is like super weird because to me, the golf club seems like pretty strong evidence, but I digress. I don't really digress, actually. Actually, that's not the definition of digress. Part of the reason police were hesitant is because Martha's time of death was determined to be 10 p.m. And it was determined to be 10 p.m. because that's when her mother, Dorothy, when she was at home, she heard the dogs barking, she heard the noises outside, remember? Because she heard those noises at 10 p.m., police decided that was the time of death. Not because of any actual, like, scientific research. They were just like, oh, you heard noises at 10 p.m.? Okay, she died at 10 p.m. And both of the Skakel boys had alibis for 10 p.m. Tommy had been upstairs doing a school project that didn't exist, and Michael, he was off with his brothers watching a movie, so they obviously couldn't have done it, even though the medical examiner later said that the time of death could have been anywhere from 9 to 5 a.m. the following day. They stuck real hard to that 10 p.m. Time of death. I got makeup on my shirt. Please don't judge it. It's my Halloween shirt, Hallowstein shirt, so we're just gonna lean with it and rock with it for the rest of this video. After 2 years and no answers as to who actually murdered their child, Martha's family actually upped and moved to New York. I can't imagine how hard that was, living in a house where you knew that your only daughter was murdered in your own yard, and to know that this person was on the loose and was likely somebody who you lived around, somebody you could have seen every single day. I can't even imagine what that was like. And what's really sad is Martha's father ended up actually dying before this case ever got solved, so he never got to know what actually happened to his daughter. An arrest warrant on this case was not issued until January of the year 2000, and she was murdered in October of 1975. And what's super crazy about this is what actually ended up pushing this case back into the limelight, and one of the things responsible for it being eventually solved and somebody being charged was a true crime writer wrote a book called A Murder in Greenwich. And the author of this book was no other than a man named Mark Fuhrman. That name may sound familiar to you, and that's because Mark Fuhrman was the racist cop on the O.J. Simpson trial whose perjury, in my opinion, heavily impacted the community's opinion and mistrust in the police who were investigating the O.J. Simpson murder, thus making it easier for them to believe that a frame job could have been going on. But now I'm on a thing. And I feel like it just needs to be said, but like, fuck Mark Fuhrman. Fuck Mark Fuhrman, dude. But I just found it to be so interesting that he had a part in the story of this case, and so I just wanted to let you guys know because it seems like the craziest thing I've ever heard, but like, fuck that guy. And after he I'm sorry, now I'm back on a thing. After he leaves the LAPD, he becomes a true crime writer after the whole OJ thing. I don't know. I just do not know. So Mark Fuhrman's book wasn't the only thing that brought this case back into the public eye. It was just so interesting and random that I wanted to bring it to you real quick. But there were also 2 other instances that really made people start talking about Martha's murder again in later years. The first incident was that one of the members of the Kennedy family, yes, you heard me right, the Kennedy family, was brought up on rape charges in early 1990s. He ended up being acquitted, but him being on trial for a violent sexual crime got people talking and got the rumor mill churning out information, and a rumor started going around that William Kennedy Smith, the one who was brought up on the rape charges, had actually been at the Skakel house the night of Martha's murder and had spent the night. Now, we're going to get into why the Kennedys would in any way be hanging out with the Skakels very shortly, because we still haven't gotten into who these people are. Who they are does matter, I think. But this was looked into and it was found out to not be true. He was not at the Skakel residence at the time Martha was murdered. But that rumor definitely got more people talking about the case again and realizing that it was still open. Of all the people who became reacquainted with Martha's murder after the Kennedy trial was a man who helped catapult her case back into the limelight as well. And this was a man named Dominick Dunne. Now that name might sound familiar to you, and that's because he is the father of actress Dominique Dunne, who actually played the older sister in the Poltergeist movies, if you've seen that. I'll put a picture for you, but she was actually murdered on November 4th, 1982 by her ex-boyfriend. And that is another case that we will cover at some point, but for now we're gonna move on. When he watched the Kennedy trial and realized that Martha's case was still unsolved, he was like, whoa, how is it possible that that hasn't been solved? And it got him to be very interested. So he actually reached out to Dorothy, Martha's mother, because he wanted to write his own book to try to bring more publicity back to the case. So he spoke to her and he got her permission and he wrote his book as well. This book was called A Season in Purgatory, and it became a bestseller, which brought Martha and her murder back into everyone's minds. Shortly after this book was released, it seems that the Skakel family panicked a little bit, and in response, they actually hired their own private investigating firm, which was called the Sutton Agency, to look into Martha's murder and get information on everybody, get information on the boys too, and kind of see what they could find out. And in doing this, every person involved had to sign a confidentiality report. And then they did the investigation and they released a report, which was called the Sutton Report, and it was given to the family. When the family read it, it was filled with incriminating information on both of the Skakel brothers. So their dad was like, oh no, this cannot ever get out. Paid nearly $1 million to get the report and have the entire thing buried. But here's what happened, and here's how we know this. One person who had worked on the Sutton Report had been missed and had not signed a confidentiality agreement. And this person, upon finding out that the case is going to just be buried and all this incriminating information was going to be hidden, actually took the report and leaked it. Leaked all of it. I believe it was actually leaked to Dominick Dunne specifically, and in this report there was a ton of incriminating information on both Michael and Tommy, such as the fact that they had both admitted to lying to police in 1975 about their alibis and what happened the night that Martha was killed. And their updated stories definitely painted a different picture about what may have happened that night. First, initially when Tommy spoke to police, he told them that he had last seen Martha at 9:30 p.m. and then he went up to do his school project and all that shit. But that's not what he told investigators later who were working for his dad. He told them that Martha actually stayed much later than 9:30 and that the two of them had actually hooked up sexually before she left, and that they didn't have sex, but you've been 15 and 17. They did all the things that you can do when you're 15 and 17. Whatever. But this accounted for if there was any DNA found on her body. This new alibi could explain why it was there, and it's very different than the story he initially told police. Michael's story also changed, and his changed a lot more and a lot weirder. So initially he told police that he had been at the movies, or not at the movies, been watching a movie with his brothers and his cousin, and then had come home around 11:30 and went straight to bed. Okay. In this report, he said that he instead went out, walking around the neighborhood, skulking through people's dark yards until well after midnight. He said that he actually ended up going to Martha's house. He says he went to Martha's house. He says he climbed the tree outside Martha's window and threw rocks at her tree, but she never responded. He said that he then jacked off in her tree before climbing down to leave. He says that as he was leaving, he could feel something out into the distance, so he threw a rock at it, but there was no response, so he then just left. In the report, there were also mental health evaluations done on both boys, and what came out in those would shed some even more interesting light on what may have happened to Martha Moxley. So, as I said, an arrest warrant was finally issued in this case in the year 2000, right? But the arrest warrant wasn't for Tommy Skakel. No, 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 no. In a big, old Shyamalan twist, it was Michael Skakel who was going to be arrested for Martha's murder. After Michael Skakel's arraignment, okay, he walked up to Martha Moxley's mother, Dorothy, and he said, and I quote, "Dorothy, I feel your pain, but you've got the wrong guy." And mother said in an interview she was blown away that he would come up and say anything to her in general. Very blown away that he would use her name, because she says she deserves more respect than that. And it was just a very questionable thing for him to have done in general. So now, who was Michael Skakel? Michael Christopher Skakel was born September 19th, 1960, making him a Virgo. He was one of 7 children born to parents Rushton Skakel and Anne Reynolds. And he was born into a pretty well-off family. Him and his family lived in a bougie neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. He had an aunt that had been married to a U.S. senator who was a Kennedy. This made Michael Skakel a cousin of the Kennedy family. Okay? He was a Kennedy. Their family was related to the Kennedys. And in interviews, people said that the Skakel family actually had more money than the Kennedy family did, because Michael's grandpa was the founder of a coal company that was one of the largest and wealthiest privately held corporation in these United States. And at the time of Martha's murder, Michael's father actually ran this company. So though Michael was pretty well off and had a lot of money, he wasn't like a very gifted student, partly because he suffered from dyslexia through most of his adolescent years. I think he didn't even get that addressed until he was in his 20s. But also, 2 years before Martha was murdered in 1973, his mother, Anne, died of brain cancer. So reasonably, this was a pretty hard time for Michael, who would have been like 13 at this time. He started to act out. He started to self-medicate with a lot of alcohol. And it said that he didn't really get a lot of help for what he was going through at the time. It was kind of, from what I read, it seems like his dad was just kind of like, here's some money, go take care of yourself. He wasn't really a very present father. So both Michael and his brothers got into their fair share of trouble. They were known as for getting in trouble with police for vandalism and for shoplifting, like they needed to steal. They were just really getting out of control, and they didn't have anyone there to rein them in and control them with their mother gone. And it's not like there was ever any repercussions for their actions, because their family had so much money that their father rushed and pretty much had the police in his back pocket. So they didn't really get in trouble for any of the things that they did. Michael's issues seemed to persist at least into his early 20s. In 1978, so 3 years after the murder, he was arrested for drunk driving and sent away to an alcohol treatment center in order to avoid being criminally charged. And he tried to run away from this school several times. And in the 1980s, he was finally entered into several drug rehabilitation centers. In that report, the Sutton report that I told you about, there was information on Michael's mental state at the time that Martha was killed, and this definitely shed some light onto his state of mind when Martha was killed. The report said that Michael was a reckless person, that he was often on drugs, and the psychologist that evaluated him said that his impulse control was marginally adequate, which doesn't seem very good considering what we're discussing here. Michael ended up turning himself into police and then was released from custody on a $500,000 bail. And initially they were considering trying him as a minor, because at the time of the crime, he was only 15 years old, the same age as Martha, even though when he was arrested, he was an adult. But after, a judge did decide the following year that he would be tried as an adult. When Michael was arrested, he was actually married. He had married a professional golfer named Margot Sheridan in 1991, and the two did have one child together, but in the year 2000, shortly after Michael was arrested for the murder, she filed for divorce, and she was just like, deuces, absolutely not. During the trial, the prosecution didn't even focus on DNA evidence, which was interesting. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. I don't know if they didn't have it, to be honest, but they did focus on Michael's own admissions. They first talked about the differing of alibis from 1975 to the Sutton report, and how wildly different those two things were, and how in his second alibi he actually placed himself at the crime scene, and at the crime scene at the time that she would have been killed. And they also took admissions that he had made. So apparently while he was in rehab, all of those times for alcohol and drugs, on several different occasions he made admissions about killing Martha. He said that the night that Martha was killed, he blacked out. He had no idea what happened. He very well could have killed her. That he wouldn't be surprised if it turned out he did kill her, and that he, you know, his family was related to the Kennedys. They could get away with murder. Which is just a weird thing to say if you're innocent. You know what I mean? In June of 2002, Michael Skakel was found guilty of second-degree murder for the murder of Martha Moxley and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He would have been eligible for parole in 2013. But our story does not end here, and you're gonna be so fucking pissed about it. So Michael has always maintained his innocence, and he filed several appeals over the years, and they were all denied until October of 2013, when a judge decided that he was entitled to a new trial due to the fact that his defense attorney did not adequately represent him at his initial trial. In November of 2013, Michael was released from prison on bond, awaiting his new trial. He was given like a GPS ankle monitor. He was told he couldn't leave the state, and he was told he couldn't talk to Martha's family or anything, but he was out of jail. In December of 2016, so over 3 years after, so he's just been free all this time, the Supreme Court actually reinstated Michael's conviction, stating that he was convicted due to the overwhelming evidence incriminating him, and that his counsel was adequate at the time of his trial despite his complaints. In 2018, Michael Skakel's conviction was again overturned by the highest court. And on the 45th anniversary of Martha's murder, which just doesn't it always seem like they do this for dramatic effect? Like, why would you do it on this day? But on the 45th anniversary of her death on October 30th, 2020, so this just happened, the prosecution announced that they would not be retrying Michael Skakel for the murder of Martha Moxley. They said that they did not believe that they had enough physical evidence to convict Michael Skakel beyond a reasonable doubt. They said that at this point, retrying him would be pointless because so many of their witnesses had died at this point, and with no additional forensic evidence, they don't think there's anything they can do, so they're not even going to try. So he is just out. That's it. He's not going back in. Can you believe that shit? Isn't that fucking crazy? And that's where we're at. That is the story of the Halloween murder of 15-year-old Martha Moxley. Isn't that just insane? I cannot imagine how her family would feel with knowing that. Like, they didn't get real justice at all. Like, Michael served a little bit of time in jail, but not very much, and now he's out, and he's just permanently out. I am very curious what you think. Do you think it was Michael? Do you think it was Tommy? Do you think it was somebody else altogether, or do you think it was this grand cover-up? I'm truly curious, because basically the prosecution's theory is that Michael Skakel was super, super pissed to find out that the girl he was interested in and his brother were hooking up, because he and his brother had a never-ending dick measuring contest with each other, and he was just so upset to have lost. So he basically waited till Martha left. He followed her home. He hit her in the head to knock her unconscious before dragging her away and literally raining hell down on this 15-year-old child. There were, of course, other theories out there too that didn't even involve the Skakel family. There was one that I read about a couple of boys that somehow involved like Kobe Bryant. It was just like a weird one. You know how the internet gets sometimes, that these boys were saying that they wanted to go out and bash some girl, and there were some other theories as well, but none of them panned out quite like the Skakel one did. The Michael Skakel one. But I'm very curious to know what you think happened. Please let me know down below. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you every bit of information you would want when looking into this case, because it's definitely a case worth remembering. I just want to thank you for hanging out and remembering Martha with me today, because her case, this story is so sad. Her death was so brutal, and it just seems like she got no justice at all. Her family got no justice at all, and no one's ever going to be held accountable for what happened to her. And that's just so tough, quite frankly. Please let me know of any cases you'd like to see me cover down below, both morbid makeup and Hallowstein content, because at the time that I'm uploading the first video, I'm still going to be filming other videos, so you may be able to get your suggestion in before I am done. And just to keep in mind, for Hallowstein specifically, my plan is to stagger. So one video on Monday on a murder that happened around Halloween, and then on Friday, a more spooky one, a murder that was inspired by a horror movie, or a horror movie that was inspired by a crime, something like that. So keep that in mind when leaving your suggestions. But of course, I want to hear your suggestions, because every time you leave one, I add your name to my list with your suggestions. So if I do the video, I can give you a shout out, because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. Otherwise, you would not be here. Of course, if you have not already, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell, because I put out a new video every single week, 2 a week, hopefully, through the month of October. And I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, I've got all my social media linked down below. I have an Instagram, I have a Twitter, I have a Facebook page, and I have a Facebook group, and I'm always trying to respond to you guys and talk to you guys on there. And in addition to that, I also have all the makeup I wore listed down below, earrings, normally nail polish, but you know, I'm really, really tired and I didn't do my nails, but it's all listed down below for your convenience. And of course, I want to say one more thank you to Dossier for wanting to hang out and work with me on this video. I think that that's super duper tight to have your channel validated when you put in so much work, because the amount of hours, I put in more hours a week on this channel than I do on my actual job. So it's nice to be validated. And of course, thank you guys for always being so cool, because I really do have the best community here, and I'm not gonna gush because I'm not the type. But you guys are fucking cool. And with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Happy Hallowstein, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.